Rethinking an orchid repot with rocks. Is it okay? All of this and more coming up at the Orchid Hut. Welcome back to the Orchid Hut. My name is Dana and thank you for joining me today in this video, which is going to be a little bit different than my typical orchid repotting videos. I'm going to do something a little bit different with this orchid today. I'm not going to be using any type of orchid bark to repot it. And we'll talk about this orchid just a little bit, talk about what I am going to use, and as I'm working, I'll give you a little bit more detail about the orchid show that I recently attended in central Louisiana, which actually was quite fabulous. All right, so let's get started with the orchid that we're going to be working with today. And in a way, this one is a tiny bit of an embarrassment. So this is Oncidium Sharry Baby Red Fantasy. And it was one that I had purchased over the summer. And you know, I thought I had it in a protected location, and then one day I noticed that the leaves were getting pretty severely sunburned because it was in a place where the sun was hitting it just the tiniest bit too much all of a sudden. And you know, it kind of was a bit neglected after that point. Did have something happen to a leaf here. We did have a few thunderstorms and I think it fell over at one point. I have been keeping it watered, but it is in dire need of a repot and a cleanup. It does have some new growth, which is encouraging. It has a new growth right here, and it has the tiniest little bit of a new growth right here that doesn't seem to be very strong. But nonetheless, this needs some attention so that it can go back into a state where it has an opportunity at least to thrive. So what we are going to do today is repot this Sharry Baby and not use any orchid bark whatsoever. And the thing that's been happening, I guess, that kind of prompted me into repotting this orchid this way is because recently I have had a ton of questions about what media do you use? What media do you use? And you know, most of my orchid videos mention using the Repot Me pre-made mixes, which is a matter of convenience, especially for beginners, and even for someone like me who doesn't want to take the extra time to always mix up, you know, a batch of orchid bark. So, and especially if you like different components in your orchid bark, like, you know, leca and perlite and lava rock and so forth. So what I wanted to do today was repot this orchid not using a pre-made mix, not using any bark whatsoever, because can an orchid grow in mostly rocks? And the answer is yes. An orchid can grow in just about anything that's not toxic, you know, something that doesn't repel and or kill the roots. So sometimes experimenting with different potting media is a good thing because it will help you expand your hobby and it will see what will work for you and what won't work. And it's not so much about the media as it is about your watering habits, I think. Now, once this orchid is in the rocks, you know, will I need to maybe monitor it a little bit differently because the water retentiveness will be different in this pot? Absolutely. But I do think that it is something that I can do, and I think it is something that this orchid will enjoy. Now, there's also, you know, a little bit of, you know, of a theory that you should match the media to the type of root system. So, for example, if it's a chunky, thick root system, you can use a larger media versus a finer root system that you know, might prefer a finer type of media. So I have chosen today to include in my rock mix, I'm going to be using some leca and some, well, it's a kind of a cross between sponge rock and perlite because that's just a matter of size, but there are some larger pieces and some smaller pieces in here. I'm going to be using a little bit of charcoal simply because I have it and I can use it. I'm going to be using some small pebbles. We often call these pea pebbles. And I'm going to be using some larger pieces of lava rock just in the very bottom of this clay pot so that the drainage hole does not get plugged up. And then I will be mixing in some smaller pieces of lava rock within the mix itself. Okay, so now that we've done that little bit of an introduction, we're going to go ahead and mix up the media. I'm going to put the chunky lava rock in the bottom. And even though this is a finer rooted orchid, it will love attaching to the rock pieces and the leca, and certainly all of these pieces will allow enough airflow around the root system. Okay, so in this pot we're just going to put the other components and then give it a mix back and forth. Probably make a huge mess on the counter. So I'm just alternating a little bit here so that it's mixed a little bit from the get-go. Charcoal, I have to admit though, is a very, very messy media to work with because it turns your fingers and everything it touches black. Okay, now we're just going to mix back and forth. And this is sort of a substitute for mixing inside a potting tray, which I was honestly just a little bit too lazy to go into the hot garage to get. Okay, so there we are. All right, now, so our media is mixed. We're going to put just the tiniest bit in the bottom, not too much, because otherwise I think this orchid will be sitting too high. And let's have a look at the root system here. Now, I did cheat a little bit outside. I pulled this out of the pot while I was still outside. I wanted to make sure I wasn't bringing in any fire ants. And here we go, here's the root system. You know, not in the best of shape. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break here. I'm going to set aside my pot that we're going to be using. I'm going to put a little bit more paper towel down so that we can brush away this old bark mix. And then we will get on with the new home for this Oncidium Sharry baby. Okay, be right back. Okay, so back with the paper towel to work on here. I'm just going to slowly begin to work out the old media. And while I'm doing this, I'll tell you a little bit more about the Central Louisiana Orchid Show. You know, there were some really, really fabulous growers who brought a nice collection of orchids. There were probably about 5 different very stunning displays. And then there were 3 vendors who were there selling orchids. And, you know, the thing I guess that stuck with me after we drove the 300 miles, some of it through Houston traffic, which wasn't a lot of fun, but 300 miles through Houston traffic to get there, and then 300 miles through Houston traffic to get back. The thing that really stuck with me, other than the absolutely stunning orchids, was the people, and the most hospitable people. I think, you know, everyone there who was a grower was from, you know, a different walk of life, you know, different professions, different jobs, different backgrounds, different, you know, everything. But the people come together through their love of orchids and growing orchids and the enjoyment that they get from that hobby. And just such really, really nice people. A special shout out to Sarah, who is a watcher of this channel. So hi Sarah, thank you for coming over. I enjoyed chatting with you. And Pat was one of the vendors there from Louisiana. The huge dendrobium in the basket that I bought from her is Dendrobium Nestor, and only $25. I think she gave that orchid away, so I'm going to be sending her a thank you. And there was another vendor there that I bought 2 Cattleyas from that were in bud. And I'll be showing you in more detail and in a closer view of the 3 orchids that I did purchase. The Dendrobium Nestor took up the entire back of the car. So it was, we had to move the luggage around because we had to get the orchid in. And it was just really just an enjoyable time. Now, one of the things that I missed out on, and next time I go to an orchid show like this, I'm going to keep it in mind. There are judges there who have been deemed judges by the American Orchid Society. So there are judges there to give out the ribbons and whatnot. But one of the things you can do, if you know just a little bit about orchids, like me, is you can participate with the judges in the judging process. And I thought, what an outstanding way, to expand your knowledge about orchids and, what they look for in judging. And so next time I go to one of these local shows, I am going to try to make an effort to be open at the actual time of judging so that I can participate in that way, because I just think that would just be great fun. Okay, so we are almost done here with what we can pick out by hand. All right, another little short break here. I'm going to rinse this off at the sink and clean up the mess right down here and be back with a washed root system. Okay, so back from the sink and cleaning up the mess. I am going to quickly give this a spray with hydrogen peroxide, something that I typically do when I repot for the first time from a grower, because you're never quite sure what might be in that pot. Okay, and there are some new root tips. Some of them may have gotten damaged. This is a very fine root system. I'm not going to try to work through all of this and figure out what is still alive or not, although I do see some roots that are very much still alive. I am, though, going to cut away, and I have already flamed my cutters. I'm going to cut away the old sheaths because it's kind of a place where it just wants to stay a little bit soggy unnecessarily. There's some new root tips right there. And such a shame that this one got sunburned when I discovered it that way. I had a few choice words. I was upset with myself for having not been paying attention. All right, this is a seedling bulb here. We're just going to remove that. And in theory, we could put some cinnamon there, but it's such a tiny little spot. I don't hold out much hope for this new little growth right here. It seems very weak. But when this one is repotted, the hope is that it will get some new strength to grow and thrive because as of right now, it's just pretty much neglected. It was in bloom when I purchased it, so I know that it is mature enough to bloom. In fact, there's the old bloom spike right there. We'll cut that away. And I'm just slowly working my way around. And there's two new growths right here. Neither one of them super strong, but maybe it will do better once it's repotted. Now, the other thing, you know, it's one of those kind of uphill growers. So I think this is one of the reasons why a lot of people mount these, but I really don't want to have to take care of it that way. So when I get it in the new pot, I'll have to make an adjustment for that. I don't want to remove this older bulb because it is still helping the plant. Now, what to do about these sunburned leaves? Well, in my case, I'm not going to do anything because the rest of the leaf is still functioning for the plant, and so I don't want to cut away something green that's helping the plant, you know, do its job of photosynthesis. So I'm just going to leave that, even though it's a little bit unsightly. There is some unusual yellowed mottling here on two of the leaves. I don't know if that's related to the sunburn or not. It was not that way when I purchased it. However, it appeared in conjunction with these sunburn spots, so that could just be an indication of too much light. If you look on the back side of those same leaves, they're green. So the discoloration is only on the front side, I believe, that was catching too much light. The back side of the leaf is fine. So I'm going to be leaving that as well. You know, it's not the prettiest, but you know, we have to think about the growth of the plant. And I want to make sure that the newest growths are kind of at the right height. So I want these newer growths to be kind of at the very lip of the pot right here. So it looks like I can put a tiny bit more in the bottom and get all of these roots in. Dead or alive, everybody's going in the pot. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. All right, so now we want to just think about positioning. So I don't hold out a lot of hope for this growth down here. You know, so I'm going to go ahead and position this closer to the edge of the pot. This is not something I typically do, but this orchid is big enough. It's a bit of an optical illusion, really, that it's scooched over that way. And so it's not too odd that it's positioned to the side. I want to give these two more room for sure. And, you know, if all goes well, I will not have to repot this for a couple of years. Typically I would tap this, but because it's a clay pot on my granite countertop, I don't want to cause it to crack anything. Okay, so as usual, I'm the tiniest bit short on media. So just another quick break here, and I will top off this pot. Notice how the rocks really hold it upright and weight it down. I really don't even need a stake, I don't think. Okay, be right back to finish the pot. Okay, so just a little bit more leca, sponge rock, and lava rock to top off the pot here. And this may be the first time you've actually seen me repot in a clay pot. And yes, that can work okay as well. but you do just have to think about how it may need a bit different of a watering schedule, because everything that's inside the pot as well as what it's planted in is porous, and so the water may evaporate more quickly than it would if you had orchid bark in a plastic pot. All right, so I think this is a very attractive repot of this orchid that needed some attention. Okay, so thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or learned something new, please give it a thumbs up. The subscribe button will be coming up in the right-hand corner of the screen, bottom right-hand corner, and click that notifications bell so that you know when I posted something new. Okay, last little bit of tidy up. Talk to you all next time.